All right, you there?
All right, what's going on, everybody? This is another episode of Barbell Therapy with Dwayne and Aaron. And before we get started, I just wanted to say something real quick to our listeners out there. Our goal with this podcast is just to make sure that we're always providing good quality content. So if you have heard something that you like, go ahead and like, share, and by all means, please comment on what you hear because we really want to create a dialogue. So we'd like to know what you think about what we're saying, and that can be good, bad, indifferent, whatever. Um, if you do like it, go ahead and let us know. Or if you just have any personal experience or feelings on anything that we share, go ahead and let us know that. And also, let us know what you want us to talk about. Are there any fitness or nutrition or just general wellness questions that you want us to address? Just go ahead and let us know in the comments, and we really appreciate that. And we'll work it into one of our episodes. So, just to recap, we've talked about some stress and how that relates to our fitness and wellness programs. We talked about exercise selection and different assessments that are popular in the industry. And today we're talking about a topic that's near and dear to all of us. It is very easily one of the most confusing topics in the fitness and wellness world. And today we're talking about nutrition. So, and with regard to nutrition, there's just so much information out there, and I'm just eager to jump right in. I have so much to say. I feel like I'm just overflowing with information and comments and all of that. But hey, Aaron, what do you want to get us started with in terms of nutrition?
Yeah, so I think when we're talking about nutrition, we need to start with the foundation. We need to establish definitions. We need to establish the baseline because again, with everything that can become fancy and distorted, we can lose what we're talking about when it comes to nutrition. So obviously, when we're speaking about nutrition, we're talking about the life-sustaining nutrients that we need, and then we can break down nutrients into macronutrients and micronutrients. You always hear people talking about counting calories, counting macros, what those consist of. So I figure that's a good place to start, letting everybody know what these are, what they do, because a lot of the confusion can come from the fact that we just don't know what they are and what they do. So essentially, when we're talking about macronutrients, we're talking about our fats, our carbohydrates, and our proteins, right? Water also falls into this macronutrient, right? Nutrient being life sustaining, macro, we need large amounts of them. Again, this basic understanding that I just put out there already gets distorted, and we'll talk about that when we discuss demonizing major food groups and things like that. But these are macronutrients. They're life sustaining and needed in abundance. So micronutrients, we're talking more just your vitamins and minerals. Again, still life sustaining, but we don't need to eat vitamin C like we do chicken, right? So we don't need them in large quantities. When going into the macronutrients, our carbohydrates are a major fuel source for the body. Contrary to what is out there, carbohydrates are stored in the body as carbohydrates in the muscle, right? So plants store carbohydrates as starch in their plant structures, and we store carbohydrates as glycogen in our muscles. If we eat the appropriate amount of carbohydrates, carbohydrates will not turn to fat. They'll be readily available as glycogen in the muscle. Our protein is the building blocks to the body. This is what develops the muscle tissue. Again, this can be used for an energy source if needed, right? And we'll talk about how we need to balance our macronutrients, or else we can kind of quote unquote rob our gains, if you will. But this is the building blocks to muscle, and we'll talk about the importance of timing with protein intake to make sure that we're keeping lean mass on our body. But when we understand lean mass, we need to associate this with a good quality protein. And then finally, the other controversial macronutrient kind of goes back and forth between carbs and this one, fats. Fats are another major fuel source for the body. Different from carbs and protein, they're a little heavier in calorie content. They're a little larger by nature. So your carbs and protein are like 4 calories per gram. Your fat's going to be 9 calories per gram. So this is a big boy. Again, he's a major energy source and a fuel source for us. But the way that we use it as an energy source is a lot different than carbohydrates. Carbohydrates tend to be a stronger, quicker energy source than fat. But again, we'll discuss that as we go along. But when we're talking about nutrition, what it boils down to, what these diets boil down to, is always some sort of controversy between fats, proteins, and carbohydrates, right? This constitutes the majority of the calories we take in, and what we're trying to balance here and make as the right diet to make a better us, right? So when we're talking nutrition, we're talking proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and calories. That really constitutes the foundation of every argument out there.
Okay, so let me just jump in real quick, just to comment on a couple of things you said. First of all, you described the 3 major macros, the 3 that are in question the most, or well, the 3 macros, and you just barely touched on some of the questions that come up. But the main thing that you stressed was the importance of balance. They're all important. They are all life-sustaining. They are all necessary, and they all play their role, and you talked a little bit about the calories, and this is, I hope I'm not jumping the gun by saying this, but and the fact that that fat is 9 calories per gram, that was always used as a reason to demonize fat. Like, fat is so calorie dense that we need to avoid it, and that may be a good segue into this part of the conversation about the demonizing of different macros, and consequently we can go into demonizing certain foods.
Sure.
Specifically. So, my experience with that starts with the fat versus sugar debate. I remember, and this was just in my own experience, this was something that I remember. I was in high school, and it was my first. I was on the freshman wrestling team. When I was on the wrestling team, and my coach gave us like a little pamphlet, and it was something from the USDA. The food guide pyramid was big back then, and the big base of the pyramid had all the carbs on it. So the prevailing information was to get the majority of our energy from carbs, and of course to get enough protein to sustain our muscle growth, but to pretty much minimize or avoid fat altogether. And hence we got into what I call the low fat craze that spawned like the Snackwell cookies and the low fat label on all the food products that essentially gave us the impression that if it had that low fat sticker on it, that it was healthy food for us. So that's in my experience, that's where the debate began.
4 pound bag of cooking sugar has low fat on it.
Right, exactly. And that's where, and literally, and we joke about that, but seriously, I remember through high school and through college and all of that, I was an athlete throughout that whole period of time, but I still, because of that pamphlet and the information contained in it, I still thought that, like a bag of Skittles was perfectly okay to eat, but, like a Snickers bar was not.
Right.
So, and it was by a simple fact of that the Skittles were fat free and the Snickers bar was not. So
There's
it's
there's
like,
fruit and Skittles. Come on now.
right,
There's some
exactly.
there's some micronutrients in there.
Fruit is good, right? So that was that was the beginning of the debate for me. Of
Sure.
course, it has gone in every other direction imaginable since then. But that's kind of where the debate began. Like, do you have anything, any early opinion, or even if you just want to dive right into the controversy?
Yeah, so let's go right into this. Let's talk about where the pendulum has swung from one side to the other, which is what we do as an American society. It's hard for us to say in the middle. We're on a pendulum always. We swing one way to the other, right? And then I think after we establish all this and talk about all these diets, I'd like to um, bring in what history shows us in terms of our trends in our nation, and then why we don't need to be seeing a nutritionist. We need to be seeing a psychologist for our issues. So anyways, we'll get there. But diving right into this, right? It's been a pendulum swing. So carbohydrates, USDA guidelines. If we got the majority of the nation to truly follow USDA guidelines of appropriate calories, appropriate portions, 40 to 60% carbohydrates, 20 to 30% fat, 20 to 30% protein. If we got the entire nation to follow that, there would be some drastic changes in our health, right? So we can't attack the general guidelines and say, oh, this isn't detailed enough. No, it's a general guideline, right? Like going back to exercise, 150 minutes of moderate exercise is a general guideline. We can demonize and attack that and make fun of it, but just imagine if we got the whole nation to just do that baseline, then we can talk about going fancy from there. So, anyways, essentially, anytime I talk to somebody about nutrition, I preach rational, not radical, right? So we had the trend of high carb, low fat, frequent eating. This was one pendulum swing. And what we saw is when we talked about low fat, high carb, frequent eating, what happened was people just ate a lot of carbs, ate frequently, and then they overconsumed carbs because they were eating more frequently, by nature consuming more calories, and those more calories were from carbohydrate. So after years of doing this, we swung the pendulum again. We were like, oh, carbs make you fat. High amounts of calories, you're eating too frequently isn't right. And so now this pendulum today is on the other side. High fat, low carbohydrate, fasted states, very infrequent eating. I mean, it's insane how textbook we've swung. We were at high carb, frequent eating, and today we're at high fat, infrequent eating. And we've just radicalized from one side of the pendulum to the other. And what we see is nothing's changed. Go on to the CDC website and we look at the obesity trends in America. Not a single thing has changed. We're still on the uprise. 2011 to 2014, there's an uprise in obesity when we were on the high carb, frequent eating, spike your metabolism phase. And now 2014 to 2018, during our ketogenic diet phase, guess what? Obesity still on the uprise, right? So both sides of the radical argument have gotten their shine, have gotten their light, and nothing's changing. So what we need to understand is that we need to stop radicalizing, start rationalizing, and get the basics down. You've got to get your calories in control, whether that's to gain weight or lose weight. You have to be in a definition, calorie deficit or calorie surplus, for one of these two to happen. Inarguable fact, right? After that, a balance of your macronutrients, right? If you're not over consuming carbohydrates, then you're not gonna turn fat. You're gonna store them how you need to. Conversely, if you're not over consuming fats, you're gonna store them how you need to. And when we dive into this a little bit more, even the radical advocates of the ketogenic diet, high fat stuff, they'll even tell you, like, look, if you're on the ketogenic diet, but you're still in a calorie surplus, consuming all this excess fat, your blood lipid panels are going to be dangerous, right? Because you're consuming so much fat, and it's they'll admit it. So these diets, even the pushers of these radical diets understand that if you're not getting the basics down right, then of course the diet's not going to work, right? So regardless of if you're on the radical side or staying rational, you've got to get the basics in line, which is still balancing your macronutrients and still balancing your calorie intake. With this rational but not radical mindset needs to be understood that the human body, just like we always say, is adaptive. It's not degenerative. If you have a little bit more fat in your diet and it's working for you, and you're healthy and you're moving well and your diet responds to it, your body responds to that diet well, drive on. If you thrive off of a little bit higher carbohydrate intake, you're a high running athlete, your sport is demanding of that instant energy a lot more frequently, and it's working for you, and you've got the basics down, drive on, you know? So we've got to get rid of this pendulum swing, but it's just hilarious how textbook opposing the swing has come from high carb frequent eating to high fat infrequent eating. I mean, it couldn't have been more in our face, drastically changed, and I wish people would just step back and see this and stop trying to shift blame on how the diet responds and rather shift blame to personal responsibility and getting their ducks in a row.
So let's talk about the shifting blame real quick, because you talked about the pendulum swing. So basically it went from high carb and frequent eating to high fat and fasting / seldom eating. And what do you say to the person who, well, before I even get into that, so you're saying that basically if a person is in a calorie surplus, they're going to gain and store fat.
They're going to gain weight. By definition of calorie surplus, you'll be in a weight gain.
Right.
And this gets people I deal with a lot of clients. They swear by everything that they're in a calorie deficit, and in fact they are day to day. But 5 days out of the week is usually when they track, the Monday through Friday, and then the weekend, I can cheat, I can relax. And what they don't understand is when you go out to eat one meal and that one meal has 3,000 calories in it, even though 5 out of the 7 days a week you were in a calorie deficit, if we step back further and look big picture from a week to week standpoint, you are still in a net gain in calories. You're still in a net surplus of calories. So it really, you have to be careful with this because people are sensitive to this. And when you tell somebody that they are eating too much, and it's an inarguable fact because by nature they're gaining weight, right? You consuming air doesn't make you put on weight, right? The only way that you can physically have more weight on your body is by physically consuming it. So it's a very touchy subject that you got to be gentle with, but yes, the definition of calorie surplus is weight gain. The definition of calorie deficit is weight loss.
So what about this school of thought that says that the subject is more complicated than just calories in, calories out, surplus or deficit? They're saying, oh, well, this is a hormonal thing. So I am in calorie deficit, but I'm still gaining weight. But it must be hormonal. It must be my gut health. I'm not properly absorbing the right nutrients. So therefore it's getting deposited as fat instead of getting turned into muscle glycogen for use. So
absolutely. So when we're again, that's where we got to be careful because there's so many quote unquote issues out there that people want to cling to these issues and use them as their excuses and their cop outs and things like that. Thyroid issue, metabolic issue, whatever issue you want to talk about and say you have, if you're not consuming the calories, you physically cannot increase your weight. Now, body composition, right? That's a whole different subject. That's when we get into the macros. That's when we get into making sure your macros are balanced, because what are you doing? How are those macros being stored in your body, right? I always like to tell people that I can put you on a Twinkie diet where you eat nothing but Twinkies all day long, and as long as you are in a calorie deficit, you're going to lose weight. Now, is that a healthy weight loss? No, you're storing a lot of fat. You're having a lot of attrition on your lean mass. Yeah, that scale's dropping off because your definition in a calorie deficit, but your body composition, your health, obviously, that's going to crap. So essentially, there's a pecking order in terms of getting this all correct, right? So I'll explain to them to establish the story. Like, I can put you on a Twinkie diet and have you lose weight. Conversely, I can put you on a carrot diet, carrots and celery, and have you gain weight if you consume a calorie surplus, right? So the pecking order first is make sure your calories are lined up with your goal. Weight maintenance, you want to be at a calorie neutral, right? Weight loss, you want to be calorie deficit. Weight gain, you want to be calorie surplus. Once we get baseline number one down, once we acknowledge that you need to pay attention to portions, you need to pay attention to what you're doing, then we can start chipping away at the next stuff, right? Then we can take the next step, right? It's just like exercise. I can't dump everything on you at once. Let's work one problem at a time. Let's acknowledge that you are binging, over consuming, not paying attention to your portions at some point in time, whether that's day to day or the weekends are just chaos for you. We have to acknowledge that you've got to get your portions in line with your goal. The second thing is, from there, that's when we can start playing with the macronutrients and making sure that you're getting in what you need, right?
But so we talked about hormonal things, we talked about thyroid, we talked about all of that. But so what do you say to the person who says, okay, I really am in a calorie deficit, I'm doing everything that I'm supposed to do, it's just my metabolism is just slow and it just doesn't burn off the calories that it's supposed to burn? Perfect. So what do you say about the person with the slow metabolism?
Excellent. So that's actually a really good question, because I see this all the time at the work I'm in right now. I actually do metabolic testing, right? So we'll hook you up to a machine, and the metabolism, or how we display the metabolism, or how the body functions rather, is just like a fire, right? A fire burns oxygen and puts off CO2. Well, so does our body, right? We burn up oxygen and we put off CO2. And the metabolic testing that we run, we measure that burn rate. And what we're finding during that test is the burn rate of the body. And the burn rate of the body is what we call RMR, resting metabolic rate. So from this, I'll get a lot of people that come in and say, oh, well, my doctor wants to know if, that they might be obese or they might be underweight, right? I get a lot of underweight people that come in that say, oh, my metabolism's through the roof. I can eat all day long and not put on weight. Or conversely, I'll have the overweight person say, hey, yeah, my metabolism's slow. And they just want the test for that reassurance, right? And this is where it kind of goes from nutrition to psychology, because irregardless of what that test prints out, if there's a normative value that says they're slow, guess what I still have to do? We still got to line your calories up at a deficit, right? Congratulations, your resting metabolic rate is slow. So because you're only burning this much, we still got to put you in a deficit. We still got to get your portions in control. Conversely, somebody that's burning it real high, real fast, which tends to be people with a lot of lean tissue that we can talk about later. But the question, or the answer, is still the same. Like, congratulations, you have a fast metabolism. You're trying to put on weight. You're not eating enough. It's not happening. Again, we go back to the definition, the inarguable definition of a calorie deficit. By definition, is a continual weight loss. Maintenance is a net neutral, and surplus is a weight gain. Your metabolism, slow, fast, normal, doesn't matter, because we still have to adjust the calories for it. But obviously, we want your metabolism to be running high and efficient, because this just shows that your organs, which make up the majority of the metabolism anyways, right? A lot of people put it on lean tissue like muscle and stuff, and muscle constitutes about 20% of metabolism, some studies say, which is a lot compared to adipose tissue. Fat is about 5% of the metabolic rate, but the majority of metabolism, like 80% of the metabolism, comes from our organs, right? Just liver function, lungs, all these processes that we have. That's where the majority of the metabolism comes from. Now, exercise ups your metabolism, one, because you're increasing lean mass, which is a little bit more metabolically active, but two, you're upregulating your organs, right? Your heart's working, your lungs are working, right? All these large organs that take up a lot of that metabolic rate are upregulated. So that's how exercise influences metabolism. There's when it comes down to it, your metabolic rate is what it is. Calories and what we need to pay attention to doesn't change. And I always want you to continue to progress your exercise, because even if you have a fast metabolism, awesome, great, let's just keep it going. Slow, hey, doesn't change anything. We got to get you exercising.
Right. And it goes back to something you said, like at the very beginning of our discussion. If we can get to a place where we can reasonably know that we are in a calorie surplus, calorie deficit, or calorie maintenance, that's the best place to start before we even start discussing all of the other smaller things, the metabolic effect, and you have some people that want to focus on the small details at the expense of the huge details.
Bingo.
The
Exactly.
elephant in the room. It's like, and I just feel the need to throw this out there, And one thing that we haven't mentioned yet is something that I've heard called the thermic effect of food.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where that myth that says, hey, well, I heard that if I just ate celery all the time, that I would lose weight, because it takes more energy to digest the celery than what the celery provides. And of course, it's a myth. It's an urban legend, but it violates the common sense rule to me anyway, because nobody in their right mind would try to live off of celery. So it's like why would we even discuss that? But
so to touch on that real quick, that thermic effect of food, that's where the big craze for high protein came in, and with this there was, again, we lost the understanding. So a higher protein, when we ingest protein, there is a higher level of thermic effect on protein digestion, right? Just takes a little bit more energy to digest. Big picture, this is minute. This is minimal. If you're over consuming calories day in and day out, this has no effect on you. So the high protein craze came in with a higher thermic effect of food. Yes, true, applicable to you, well, dependent on psychological issues. But two, protein along with fiber we see as an extremely satiating substance. So by nature of more protein, by nature of more fiber, you're going to be fuller longer, right? If you consume 2,000 calories of chicken, I mean, that's a lot of meat, right? To put that in your body, you're by nature going to stop eating. So there's a there's an auto regulation there of portion control just by the satiating factors. And yes, thermic effect takes a little bit into play with the protein, but it's mostly satiation, and all these little things like this come down to it's not the diet, it's the life hack, right? The high protein diet was just a life hack to get you to stop consuming so many calories, right? The ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting, it's working, and the evidence is out there, but the evidence is more for the psychosocial side of the house. It's a life hack. When you only have 8 hours to eat, you're just by nature not consuming as many calories, right? That's what it comes down to. So a lot of these diets are getting credit for where the credit should just be given to the life hack. I guess that's what really needs to be honed in on.
right. So you already